Go ahead now.
Hi, this is Ray Anderson, and welcome to another broadcast of the three Consulting Amigos. And today, what we thought would be valuable to those of you who might be listening at this point or even in the future is discussing value chains. You know, today in business, understanding where waste is and understanding how to create top line revenue and understanding how to get people in the door and retain your customers is probably the heart of a business. And Ron today is going to go over one of the concepts that he's developed called the Value Diamond. And Ed's going to speak a little bit about his experience and how do you create value inside the company, because ultimately, when you want to exit, the value of the company will drive your retirement. So it's really, really critically important. Who wants to kind of kick this thing off?
Ed, go ahead and talk a little bit about a company value, and then we'll talk about customer.
Okay. Well, when you're valuing a company for an exit, one of the most important parts of the valuation process is top line revenue. And the question is, what's the future look like? If you can have a business model where you have revenue growth of say 6% or 10% a year compared to no revenue growth, that's a big indicator on the value and an impactor on the valuation multiple of the company. So it's extremely important, and it has to be part of the exit strategy of anybody contemplating moving on and selling their business. And as you can tell from this conversation, as we get long involved process, it isn't something you do overnight, and it's a very thoughtful process. And requires a lot of ingenuity and thinking and laying out your proposition and how sticky your customers are to your business. The stickier they are, the greater the valuation factor of the business.
Well, if you can, Ed, I'd like you to build on that a little bit. Basically, we had an opportunity to work together with a client, and I recall when you came in, one of the things that you immediately focused on is, okay, what is our 3-5-year plan? And part of that plan was, how do we expand the business to be able to achieve the goals that we had a couple of the executives in the company that we're looking for. Help us understand a little bit about that whole strategic process, because I think it's really tied in with the value diamond that Ron's going to talk about.
Well, I think you have to determine what your proposition is to your customers and how you differentiate your business model from others, your competitors. And the better your story that you have in that area and the more results that you have, the more valuable your company truly is. So that's really a big deal. And it requires the ownership and the management to think differently at times. Sometimes there's been some great business opportunities out there, but for whatever reason, they don't want to do them.
Right.
And because they're preoccupied on what they're doing right now, which is one of the normal problems with all businesses. You get so focused doing your day-to-day work, you can't think outside the box. By bringing in an expert like Ron, you get some perspective on where the company could be on top line revenue. And people are very interested in buying companies that are growing. They are not interested as much in companies that are not growing. So that is a big, big positive when you're selling your company. And I think all businesses have opportunities to improve their top line revenue. They just need to think a little bit more creatively and focus on what they do best and how they can do more of that to grow revenue.
Yeah, and I think Ron, I'm gonna let you pick it up here, and not to interrupt as much as what I believe Ed has kind of laid out for us is that we have an opportunity here to help businesses grow, but many of them don't understand what that means, particularly because they're sometimes so wrapped up in running their business. As Ed said, they don't really get a chance to think out of the box. And not surprisingly, your diamond is kind of a box turned sideways. Tell us a little bit about how you developed that and how you found it important in helping your clients see outside of their normal way of looking at value?
Sure, yeah. We're talking about a couple of definitions of value here today, and I think that when we talk about company value, a lot of people will make the assumption that that's what somebody will pay for the company, and I think that's what Ed is saying, and that's kind of the ultimate, I guess, goal, and that is to make your company valuable so that you can leave it and sell it for something when you're done. We're focusing on small business here, and
Hmm.
small businesses, business owners rarely think about the value of their company at all. They think more about, are they doing what they can do? Are they doing what they hopefully they're doing something that they like to do. They're dealing with daily problems of employees and top line growth and a lot of those things without really thinking about value. And I remember, Ed, one of the things that you'd said to us a long time ago as we began these conversations and started to work together is that people should start thinking about what the value of their company is going to be the day they buy or the day they start the company. One of the pretty incredible things I learned 2 or 3 years ago is really how the Koch brothers think about their various companies. Now, the Koch brothers are a lot of times in the political news, but if you're interested in making money, you can study what they believe to figure out how you do it as the second largest private company or business in the world. And what they do is that they don't put a lot of personal feelings towards a particular company. They're in chemicals and fabrications and furniture and a whole bunch of businesses. They always take a look at what the value of each company is and whether or not they can enhance it. And then what they do is they direct all of their managers to work towards the mechanisms that cause the value to increase. Now, this is so important to them that they've published a book on the whole concept of how they calculate value, and they're willing to sell any company to anybody who believes that the value is higher than what they think the value is. In other words, they've got a kind of their own, not really book value, but their own formulaic value that they place on their business. If someone comes along and says, no, it's worth $1 million more than that, they sell it. That's because they think, we don't know how they think it's worth this much money, but if they do, they can go ahead and buy it because we're only valuing it at, say, X minus $1 million. So because they're constantly aware of what the value is in a given company, then they can make a determination as to whether or not they should continue it and where to put resources. So a lot of problems I have had it with small businesses, and this kind of leads into, well, how do you get people thinking about value of their company, and how do customers think about the value of the company in terms of what they're receiving back? The way that it really developed was that I was running into issues with trying to figure out what of the myriad of problems should be focused on. And in the process, because there's so many things, when you take a client on that's new, there's so many things that need to be worked on normally. And so how do you determine to do, what order do you put them in? How do you rank them in terms of priorities? And so we began to talk a little bit about, well, value of the company and value of pieces of the company and value of a particular operation. And so as we began thinking about that, we really were just asking the question, well, what is it? What is value? And most people think that value is something that has to do with, the quality, say, of a product or service, the service, for that, the price. And what I discovered is that did not predict who won the business by itself. And then after a lot of thought in reading research and talking to clients, I really kind of came to the realization that you cannot, first of all, you have to see the customer has a perceived value. It's not a calculated value. It's not the value that Ed would put on a business. It's just a simple kind of a ratio of this product cost me so much from this company, and compared to another company, I like it better or worse. And therefore, their perceived value is that they'll make their purchasing decisions. So the issue really comes down to, how do people decide what product to buy? And the answer we came up with is because of the perceived value they have of that. Well, as we continued to work forward, we finally realized that there's more than 3 components. There are 4 components. And the 4th component is what the image or brand is. And when you bring those 4 components together, you can begin to identify who's going to win the business. And so that's sort of the story of how that was developed over 20 years ago. And I've used it consistently for at least 2 decades.
Let me interject here for a minute if I can, Ron, because that idea of image is, in terms of valuation, and I'd like some input from Ed on this. It's kind of goodwill. It's a kind of a blue sky number, but as you pointed out with the Koch brothers, I mean, they have a perception in their mind what it's worth, and if somebody comes in and says, no, our perception is X and yours is Y, they go, you got it. So is that consistent? I mean, that idea of goodwill, and how, as you build your company, that's something that's an integral part of the ultimate value of the business. Ed, you want to take a shot at that before Ron gets into his diamond?
Yeah, I really believe any business has to be looking 5 years down the road and looking for ways to make the company more valuable. If you're at a crossroads and you think it's at its optimal value, you probably should do what the Koch brothers suggest, and that is sell it to somebody else who can take the company to the next level of profitability. And I think good ownership and good management is always looking for ways to make the franchise more valuable. So I think I think most people are pretty good on the expense side most of the time. However, where they really fail is trying to get more specific information from their customers on how well they are doing in meeting their expectations. The more information that you can get on the top line of that nature, the more valuable that business will be. So you mentioned goodwill, Ray. Well, that's very important because that's the biggest part of any business. So if you have a multiple in an industry of 4, and then if you can find ways to show people why your multiple could be 8 because you have sticky customers that want to do business with you, you give them engagement in your business, that's a really big factor, and buyers are willing to pay for that.
Yeah, and I think, Ron, this is where your 20 years of research on the diamond really comes to play, because basically in all those years working with this different customers, you kind of identified and really enumerated what has to be done to create additional value for an exit. While I don't know if that was your intention, that's what you've done. So go ahead and give us some more insights on your on the 4 elements of the diamond.
I'm going to bring up a couple of screens here and kind of just walk you through a couple of graphics so that you can kind of get a sense for what this is about. As I had mentioned, it's all about perception, and that really has to do with the way of regarding or understanding something, or a mental impression. And I just want to remind you, we won't spend a lot of time on this, that it has to do with the ability to see, hear, or become aware of something through the senses. And this is the old thing you've all seen, and that is, do you see a chalice or do you see 2 faces?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of different perceptual ideas about that. And of course, this has to do with the visual primarily, but there also are other kinds of perceptions. There's, of course, this old one that you've seen. This is like after 6 beers, before 6 beers, the ugly woman turns into the, and so you know, it's like, well, what is the circumstance under which people are making these decisions, and what are the perceptions about a particular company or product? And it's quite interesting when you begin to look at it this way, because you realize how many mistakes are being made in product development and company perception all of the time. Here's the little cat that imagines itself big. So let's define it real fast. It's a fair return or equivalent in goods, services, and money. It's something that is exchanged. Well, the perceived value is slightly different. It's the worth that a product or service has in the mind of the consumer. Jack Trout, a famous, just recently deceased, a very famous strategic marketer, basically came up with the concept of perceived, not value, but of positioning, where he basically said that the marketing positioning is trying to put the perception in the mind of the customer. And so this really has to do with what the mind thinks about a particular product or a particular company. Then the question is, well, how do customers really make these buying decisions, and what are the components? So what I had mentioned, briefly earlier, is that there are at least three things that we can all agree on. At least I've never had anybody argue with me on this, and that is quality, price, and service. But those three things alone, you'd say, well, one company has got a high quality, very high price, and high service, and high quality, high service, and a low price. Shouldn't that company win all the business? And the answer is yeah, but not always, and they don't. But when you add the fourth component, you have quality, price, service, and you have image or brand. Now you begin to explain why Ralph Lauren does what they do by selling the same, a basic polo shirt for $55, and you can go buy the same shirt at Walmart for $25 or $15. I don't even know the price, but
or I was going to say, the example as a car buff, the manufacturer of a Toyota and a Rolls Royce probably are very close in terms of the cost of manufacturing, but the price is not.
That's correct. And so somewhere along the line, there's a perceived difference in value. Another good car example that I like to use is Jaguar. Jaguar is just a beautiful, gorgeous car, in my opinion, and some of the best styling that is available, and the quality is really not very good. If we can get into the depths here, but the quality means several things. But to me, the primary issue in quality is reliability. And you can't find a more unreliable car than a Jaguar. And so, but they're still doing business. It's like, how do they stay in business?
Yeah, right.
Their service must be good, right? Well, we know their image is good, their price is high, their quality not so much, service must be fabulous. Well, they're maybe a little bit better. The independent shops might be better, but are they really that much better? Well, the truth of the matter is that years ago I had a boss who had a Mercedes, and he quickly realized that it was in the garage he had a Jaguar, and it was in the garage most of the time, so he had to buy another one. And he actually felt that this was a pretty good image builder for himself, because not only could he afford one, but he could afford to have two Jaguars, because he knew that one would be in the shop all the time. And so the times that both of them were working, he let his wife drive one of them. And when only one of them was working, his wife had a backup Honda or something to drive.
Right.
And so
it kind of reminds me, in my younger days, I had a Fiat Spider, and I learned the hard way that Fiat was an acronym for "Fix It Again, Tony."
Yeah, right. And so, despite the fact that all common sense would say, don't buy that, it's the image, it's the brand that turns it all around. And so you just come to the realization that image and brand absolutely positively does change people's image on, or change their attitude about whether they're going to buy something or not.
Right. Right.
So when we kind of take a look at these, we have to look a little further. And it is the only explanation for the examples we mentioned, as well as others like, say, Absolute Vodka, that completely kill the leader in vodka, Smirnoff. And how did they kill it? Was it because the vodka is better? Well, no. Anybody that, yes, there are
Potatoes are potatoes.
well, and there are people who swear that certain vodka is better, but I would counter that and say vodka just tastes like vodka all the time, unless you put a flavoring in it. And of course they do now. That's what,
Yeah.
that's one of the differentiators. So Absolute, how did they differentiate themselves from Smirnoff? The bottle. And literally, the bottle made the difference, and they became the market leaders. Another example is something that a lot of us partake of every day: Starbucks. Why does Starbucks get 3 times more per pound of coffee than other companies? Is it really the taste? Yeah, some people believe it is, but we know from studies of wine that people think it tastes better because they believe it's better, because they believe the brand is better. So we know that psychologically, this has a huge amount to do with people's decision. That's why branding is so critical, because it helps differentiate, in the perceived value. So here's kind of how it works. We use a rating system, and this can be just simply having questionnaires of the management. Sometimes just for a quick and dirty, look, it makes sense. Sometimes you go right to questionnaires to customers, and you get, empirical evidence about rating the quality. So if we put this on a little Venn diagram, you can see that you just go ahead and rate, say, the quality, which in this case is about a 3.5, service is about a 3, etc. And you simply just connect the dots, and you see what the overall area might be. So if one company comes in looking like this, then the next company might look like this. What you have is a situation where everything is exactly equal except for price. And so given that the 2 products have the same exact quality, service, and image, it's the lower price that wins. Is that 100% of the time? No, but it's probably 90% of the time. It's pretty hard to justify that if the perception of the 3 of the quality, service, and brand are exactly the same, that somebody's actually going to spend more for exactly the same product. That rarely happens. By the same token, you can take a look at a little different scenario here. And given that the only difference is service, then the low service loses. So everything is exactly the same, but one has the terrible service and one has the good service. So that's the difference. A lot of times, picking your telephone provider or your internet provider, there's only one difference in the product. It's the service, and whether or not, even in the case of those kinds of companies, if they just answer the stupid phone. I mean, it's really amazing how difficult it is to get somebody to answer the phone and help you.
If I can make an observation here from your response, you've had some challenges with that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I've had, and I'm fairly short-tempered about people not answering the phone, because that's a big part of marketing and customer service.
Right. Right.
So, an example is Walmart versus Kmart, et cetera. And then we'll just go through 1 or 2 quick examples here. Given that the relative positions of the value components lead to a better understanding of competitive pressures. And so in a case like this particular one, if you happen to be the dark red instead of the lighter red one, now you have an idea as to what you should actually do or what you can do to even up your value, your perceived value, simply because you have some work to do. And so this helps companies figure out what they should work on first or prioritize. So in a particular case like this, you can see that the quality is a little bit better, service real close to the same. The company in the dark red has a little lower price, but they have to have a lower price to be competitive on an equal basis because people don't think that they're as good. So, and they may actually perceive a slight difference in quality, but you can overcome that slight difference in quality. The brighter red, because their image is higher, they're actually able to get a little bit more money for that same basic product, even though their quality might be lower. This happens all the time. There are many, many things that we buy where we're making sort of snap judgments about what it is. And of course, we're buying everything. We should keep in mind, we're buying everything from gum at a checkout stand when we're getting our groceries to very expensive automobiles and houses. So, you know, our decision-making process is quite different from one to the other. Yet, you know, when you pick up a pack of gum, you don't really think very much about it. As a matter of fact, you probably reach for something that you buy over and over and over again. That's branding. Because what you've done is you've already validated the quality, let's say the taste, the texture, etc. There's very little service involved in this, and so that's really kind of a non-issue. Maybe you look at the price if you think everything's the same, and you might look at the price, but if you check closely, you'll see the prices are very, very similar for similar packs of gum. And so for the most part, what's your decision made on? It's made on deep brain, old brain thoughts about image. It's almost subliminal. We make these decisions almost without any regard to consciousness.
Let me interject here. I think I'd like to kind of touch on something that I think Ed's interested too, because, you know, basically each of these has a cost too, you know, so it's not just a matter of getting the product out there, but you have to deal with cost. Let's take a scenario and think of something like Amazon versus a Walmart as an example. And let's apply these principles to what we see happening in the marketplace in terms of how rapidly this has shifted. And what are your perceptions, either one of you, on what happened and what did Amazon capture that other companies were slow to get?
Well, we're not thinking quite, no, let's see. Yeah, okay, let's make the comparison that you're going to buy exactly the same item, maybe online versus going to Walmart. Now, you're thinking Walmart online or you're thinking Walmart bricks and mortar? We'll say bricks and mortar. So in that particular,
I think what I'm getting at here, Ron, I think part of what we're talking about is how do you increase the value of a business? Mm-hmm. And one of the things that your diamond does, and what I hear Ed saying, is that, you know, you have to be aware of what's going to increase your top line. And I think what Ed said that I really that ties into this in my mind is that basically Jeff Bezos, you know, really went against the current and said, you know, I think there is a service opportunity here that is significantly greater than the brick and mortar really see, and I'm going to pursue this. It's kind of counterintuitive. That's kind of what I'm alluding to here, and I think it ties in with your diamond.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I don't think it's counterintuitive, however. It's a plain service play. The price is about the same with the exception of the differential. So, you know, you've got a tax differential that is gone now, but when they started, you had to pay sales tax and you had a shipping price. Okay, so what you had is you had incredible selection, and if you were going to look at the same exact product, you looked at the same exact quality. the image or brand of the product itself is exactly the same. There's only one thing left to compare, and that's service.
Okay.
And Amazon just finally beat everybody up on service. The only shortcoming in the beginning was, well, I've got to go to a computer and I've got to look it up on Amazon and I've got to figure out how to do it. But now the learning curve is over and done, and it's like 1 or 2 clicks to get to the product that you want. And now it's there. If you're a Prime member, it's there the following day or the day after that. They completely destroyed the difference between waiting versus bringing it home.
Given what, you know, the reason I thought it'd be good to talk about that for both of you is that, you know, none of us in this, none of our callers are going to be Amazon, clearly. They might be, but the point is that when you have access to this diamond, Ron, it enables or kind of makes you have to look at where your top line is coming from and think out of the box. And I think that's what, you know, I saw Ed bring in ideas to one of our clients that they really hadn't paid much attention to, that ultimately created a huge opportunity. And I think part of what we're suggesting here is that when we start changing the way we think about the business we think about starts to change. And in that happening, you know, the value of the business goes up because basically we start capturing new elements in the marketplace that weren't being captured before. And this diamond is the way to do that. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think so. I just take it, you know, from there and one more step, and that is when we start thinking about how our customers perceive us and our products, we know what we have to do to compete, and therefore increase top line revenues because we're competing at a higher level than our competition. So you could say, well, okay, what should Walmart do? And of course, the answer there is they have got to narrow the gap on service. And so they can focus on, well, what should we do? And they made huge mistakes. You know, they've tried 3 times to go online and build an online business, and they all failed. Now the current one is doing much better. But finally, they've come up with a way to pick things up. And now other stores have emulated that. Order online, pick up in store, pick up at curbside. So there are a lot of ways that they're trying to mitigate each one of these things. But so far, they haven't been able to match. I haven't seen it. They haven't been able to match the overnight delivery for no extra money. And therefore, it makes it very tough on them to be able to compete at that level.
Right.
So that's kind of where those, but you see, had Walmart been using something like this, and they probably did, then it helped them understand what to do and how to attack the perception. And of course, smaller businesses have to do exactly the same thing. Using a tool like this is part of the way you do it. And of course, we've only talked about the surface part of this. You dig into service, there are lots of kinds of service. You can dig into quality. There are lots of attributes to quality as well. So the issue is, well, what are these subcategories should we be working on within the 4 general characteristics?
Well, part of what, you know, the reason I brought this macro example is because I think it helps people to understand how, you know, the Walmarts of the world and the Amazons might have used this diamond or something similar to it to make some strategic decisions as to how they were going to attack the marketplace. What I think might be valuable is for us to think a little bit about Main Street at this point. And given particularly what's going on as all these businesses who have now been out of business for 2 or 3 months, how can they use this to be able to help differentiate themselves from Main Street competitors? And I don't know about you guys, but don't you think, I think to talk a little bit about this with regard specifically to restaurants might be helpful. What are your thoughts?
I think this is relevant to every small business anywhere. And I think it's a very productive process to sit down with the top leaders of the organization and reevaluate your proposition to your customer. Ray has referred to a situation where we worked on together. In that situation, the company had great service, a phenomenal reputation of 30 or 40 years in the market. And they had, their prices were too low, in essence, and they had stigmas about going after the government work. And the government work is actually very profitable work, but they ask a lot of questions and they want to know whether they can rely upon you before they're willing to do business. Well, the company we were working for, nobody in the company wanted to deal with the government. And we had to help them understand that this was a great opportunity. And we were actually in there when the government came in and helped field some of the questions and converted everybody's thinking that, hey, this is the future of this company. This is a great opportunity that we can't pass up. So again, if you don't look at the diamond and the potential opportunities that it presents, you're going to miss out on taking the company to the next level. And quite frankly, if you don't take it to the next level, why are you there? Yeah. So I think every business ought to be looking at it, whether it's pre-COVID-19 or after COVID-19, doesn't matter. It's an opportunity that's out there, and it can be really engaging. And I just love the 4 components, and there's many aspects of the 4 components, a lot of detail, but in essence, that's what you're looking at in your proposition. How do you go to market and meet your customers' expectations?
Yeah. And in addition, I want to kind of reemphasize the setting priorities part, because as we all know, working with a lot of clients over a lot of years, it's so easy for an organization to kind of get off on a tangent and, start working on, say, quality. And so, Ray, you know what it takes to change the quality of a manufactured object, and you get going, and pretty soon you've got all of these programs to increase the tolerance of the product by 100th or 1,000th of an inch, and make it all better. And Ray, you probably remember our discussions about, well, does it make any sense to let quality go versus work on image? And this is really, where I come to the conclusion that, you can work on your image a whole lot easier and cheaper than you can on trying to increase the tolerance by 1,000th of an inch.
Right.
The perceived difference in improvement is so small that you may have buyers that are not going to buy it. Now, that's not true of machined goods and certain kinds of categories of products. Sometimes you can't do the business because your tolerance isn't there, and therefore your quality is deemed very low. But if the quality is not perceived as being different by the buyer, then maybe you've got another area you need to work on. And of course, you may have to do 2 or 3 things at the same time.
Yes.
But it is just so easy to start working on whatever the owner's pet project is, and you sit around a table with 3 or 4 managers, and some guy says, "I told you that was our problem, and we have just got to get onto this." Well, it's like, no, wait a minute. I mean, we've identified it as a little bit of a problem, but it's not nearly the problem as this other problem that is cheaper to fix. And so let's work on the things that we can get done quickly and fast, and move on, and hire out. We can hire out some of these things and the other things are very difficult to change, because you have to change the whole culture of the business in order to be able to get, say, better service to come out of a particular company. Some of these are big problems.
Right.
And so the question there is, well, how far is the gap? And if the gap is really a lot, do you have a chance of, can you double your service overnight? Maybe you have to.
Well, and I think what you're saying, Ron, and I think this is really important, is that too many businesses get stuck in it's that old insanity, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results.
Yeah.
And the truth is, it kind of alludes to what you're saying. The reason that it pays to get people like us in a business is not because we're so smart. It's because we ask different questions and we begin to break down the way things are done and have them begin to look at things differently. And this value diamond is one of those examples of, oh yeah, that's right. Because as you and I both know, if you try too much on quality, it'll kill you. At some point, you can't afford it.
Yeah.
And so the question is,
And
are you better off?
The customer can't afford it either, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, those are things that we're trying to help our listeners understand, that basically you can, when you shift things a little bit in the right way, it can have a huge bottom line impact. Is that correct, Ed?
That is correct. And, Ron mentions priorities, and I totally agree, because a lot of companies, they try to do everything at once and they don't get anything accomplished. But you have to have priorities, but you also have to have a plan that makes sense, that can be adjusted over time, and formulated differently to get better performance. But the bottom line, everybody in that organization has to be on the same plan, and they have to understand what they're doing impacts the total plan of the organization. So you need priorities and you need a plan, and you need to evaluate that plan periodically. I like to look at things quarterly and see if it's achieving what it's supposed to achieve. Make some slight modifications if necessary, but again, everyone in that organization has to be saying the same thing and understand what they do, how it contributes to the bottom line of that company or satisfying customer requirements.
Yeah, you make a good point, Ed. Yeah.
Let me make this point, and then I'm going to move to you, Ron. I think the observation, and I know when we've worked together, we've all made sure that we had regular, consistent meetings with our clients, simply because in the absence of those regular, consistent meetings, it's amazing how quickly people can get distracted by things that have nothing to do with what we're trying to do. And Ron, in your case, when you think about the diamond, it's kind of like keeping it in their face, not to hurt them, but basically, oh yeah, that's where we're going. Is that, does that make sense to you guys?
Yeah, and actually it becomes part of the feedback loop.
Yes.
I mentioned the first quickie approach should maybe do it internally and see where people think they are. But as you begin to get into it a little bit more, then you take it to your customers. And today it's very easy to do with survey tools like SurveyMonkey. And so you go to a group of customers, and then you just ask them to evaluate it. Now, you don't evaluate it at the level of what do you think the quality is. You start breaking quality down into fit and finish, reliability, and 6 or 7 or 8 different categories, which I have done for industries. That's the next step, as you dig deeper into that. And then when you get the feedback, you can actually measure whether or not you're making any progress on a particular issue. So what happens then is that you treat these like, say, quarterly reports, and you can see if you're making some incremental progress with your customers on your overall perceived value. And then you do the same thing with non-customers. Now, that's a little bit tougher to do. Sometimes you have to have a panel of people that are hired to take a look at the product and say, this is what I think about it, and then they score you. But it's possible to do. Now, having the option to do that, that's a little bit maybe tougher to administrate. Takes a little bit more effort. Larger companies shouldn't have any problem doing it, but when you talk about how you get off track as a team, you can see how important it is to be able to say, whoa, wait a minute, guys. We thought we were working on a certain problem here, and we haven't improved anything at all. What's going on? Well,
Yeah.
if it's really a team cooperation problem, you can see how you begin to put the pressure on them. A lot of owners don't like to be heavy-handed, and you don't want to be heavy-handed, but you have to be honest.
Mhm.
You're going to get the problem fixed. And so
Right.
if you've got a team that's not getting the job done, maybe you put a new team on it. Maybe you
Right.
hire some new people. So the point here is that if you've got a problem and you have a product that is 90% as good as your competitors, but they're getting 90% of all the business in the marketplace, which is common, you're going to go out of business if you can't get this
Yeah.
thing solved.
Right. Right.
So, you have to know how far to go and how big of an emphasis to put on it.
And the point here that I think is relevant is that when we, as an example, Ed and I, by having gotten into this company and regularly meeting with them, Ed, tell us what was the upshot? What was the end result of this effort that took us roughly 2 years?
Well, the company improved their bottom line 8 times. That's an incredible
Yeah.
improvement.
Now, I would have to say that's not normal, but in this particular case, can you imagine what that means to the value of the business?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Their value went up 8 times, plus their multiple increased because of the stickiness of their top line revenue. So it made a significant impact on the bottom line. So, and they're continuing on with this right now. And again, we focused on 8 objectives and had quarterly meetings and got the whole management team involved and ownership. So everybody was on the same page. And any sewer monkeys, people outside of the group that were talking bad about stuff, they got exposed and got eliminated from the company pretty quick.
Right.
Because that's really important to have people focused on what you're trying to do and really mean it. And these quarterly meetings help hold people accountable for results. And I also like to show financial numbers because sometimes people need a picture of what it's supposed to look like, and they need a way of evaluating. So you do your forecasting, and forecasting is extremely valuable for holding people accountable. Do your forecasting, have quarterly meetings, and are we achieving what we thought we could achieve? And if not, what's holding us back?
And that alludes to thinking about the diamond now in relationship to this, Ron. One of the things that Ed has said several times over: stickiness. And that applies in 2 ways. One is we know that it's important for customers, and I know you've had some tremendous success with a client you have in Longmont. But also what we've learned is that stickiness has to be on the inside. People have to be as committed on the inside to achieving results as the customer is to the customer on the inside. So the 2 together kind of help you move together in an organization and increase the market value and the net profit, which is what a business is all about. So anyway, touch on that if you can, Ron.
Well, I think of stickiness as another strategic tool, and that has to do with when I talk about finding a crack in the market. In other words, building a niche that you can control, and narrowing a niche so that you can really be meaningful in a particular niche. There's a group, not a group, it's a group of data, I guess, really. It's called the PIMS principle, but it was an organization that came together of large companies to be able to put marketing information together. And I ran into this several years ago, and I've really captured it, taken a solid look at the value it has to a particular business, and to see what it can do, and if it's true with small businesses, and I found it to be the case. And basically, what that says is that you're going you're going to, if you are considered higher in quality and you also have a market share of, say, 1, 2, or 3 in the marketplace, you're going to have a margin that is going to be substantially higher than the folks who are not there. And so that principle alone says, find a market and be dominant in a particular market. Well, one of the things that allows dominance in a market is stickiness. Now, and in that particular case, I speak of stickiness as companies that are able to figure out how to be sticky, and it's hard for your customer to let go of you.
Yeah.
That used to be the case, say, with telephone.
Microsoft.
Microsoft. Well, yeah, it's hard to let go of Microsoft because that it all integrates. And like, for instance, if you have a tape dispenser, only one kind of tape fits in it, or if you have those little sign makers for the tabs on file folders, only their particular tape fits in there. So it's the same thing with motors and having to buy, or equipment, and having to buy a part that only fits. And so you make the part. All those kinds of things are stickiness. And so I kind of get off track a little bit when you talk about stickiness, but I think it's kind of the same. And that is that you want to build a relationship that is so strong with your customers based on their perceived value. If they have a high value, now you're creating a relationship, it's harder for them to leave. And so it's all very important in keeping the customer, not having to replace customers that you make mad because you make a single mistake.
Well, I think, we're almost an hour into this, so I wanted to kind of bring it to a close so we can move on. But one of the things that Ed referred to that we saw happen, it's like working with this client, they had a barrier to entry. They had a niche that they didn't realize they could really go into a new marketplace and capture a big piece of it because they thought it was too much work to get into it. And so part of what we're trying to help people do is realize on your diamond, they had a service already locked in. If they could get through the door, they would be able to hold a lot of business that they weren't aware of. And I think what we're saying here is that as outsiders, sometimes we can come in and help people see things differently that they didn't really understand. Not that people are not smart, it's just they're preoccupied, they're distracted, they got lots going on. And I think the value that we're trying to bring as we talk about the diamond or anything is how do we help them see differently and innovate where they already have strong elements that they can apply, that they already have a diamond. They just need, like you said, Ron, shift a couple of degrees here in service and it could make a huge difference in the bottom line.
Yeah. Oh, and of course they don't have the benefit of being able to take a look at lots of different companies and how certain tools work and don't work for them. They're stuck in their own company. And of course, how many companies that we would consider well run have lots of extra people hanging around to do these kinds of things?
Yes.
You've got the people it takes to get the job done every single day, but often you still don't have enough labor to be able to work on the business. And you'd like your top managers to be working on the business, but the truth of the matter is, in small businesses, they're all working in the business most of the time.
Right.
They don't really have the resources to jump in and do some of these new things.
What I've learned, having worked inside of businesses, people get very good at doing things they shouldn't be doing at all.
Well, that brings up another point in closing. From my perspective, we talked about the value of the diamond, but one of the biggest values I see of the diamond is I'm an idea guy, come up with all these ideas, but some of these ideas don't make a lot of sense. You got to run them through the diamond to make sure that you agree on stuff that's really going to make a difference. Because sometimes when you look at the market, it tells you something that's different than what you're thinking.
Right.
And that is worth so much. The more rabbit holes you go down, the more money you waste. You want to make sure exactly what's going on each one of these rabbit holes before you approach them.
Right, and you want to make sure that the rabbit hole has customers in it.
Yes, right.
Absolutely. Not what you think's there, but what's
Right.
Truly
Really
there.
there, yeah.
Right.
And
Right.
that's a great segue. What we want to talk about next week. Thank you, Ron, for kind of helping us understand more about the diamond. But what we want to talk about next week is how do you make that big exit? And a lot of what we've kind of laid a foundation for, and then next week you're going to kind of help us on that, is what does a company need to do so that it's prepared when it wants to make that exit, whether it's 1, 5, or 10 years, because you have to start preparing now. Is what do they say? The best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. Well, you don't have that choice anymore. You got to do it now. So what do you do now moving forward? And I think this will help a lot. Guys, this was great again. I want to just wrap this up. We're almost an hour into this. Ron, you have any final thoughts before we move to the next session?
I'm looking forward to the next session as a great segue into really valuing companies, sort of back the way that the Koch brothers do it. You bet.
Yeah. Ed, do you have anything else to add, or you want to wrap it up for today?
Well, I think it's time to wrap it up, but I've really enjoyed this discussion on the value of the diamond. And I just think it's a discipline that every business needs to utilize in looking at how it's going to market for its customers.
Yeah, this is very good. I wanted to thank everybody again for participating. Ron, thank you for your explanation on the diamond. Ed, we look forward to hearing from you next week on how to make a big exit. And to everybody, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.